Karen burned down my house. Then justice came knocking. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have one small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from our channel. It takes only a second, it costs nothing, and it helps us keep bringing you dramatic, emotional stories where patience, courage, and justice collide. Your support truly means more than you know. And before we begin, tell me where you're watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's go back to the night my home burned, and the woman responsible had no idea who she would be facing when the courtroom doors opened. Some people think fire destroys evidence. Vanessa Harrow was about to learn that sometimes it only lights up what they were trying to hide. At 2:17 that morning, I stood barefoot in the middle of Silver Pines Drive and watched 31 years of my life burn. The heat reached me from across the lawn. Flames rolled through the upstairs windows with a deep, hungry roar. Glass cracked. Somewhere inside, a ceiling beam gave way with a sound like a rifle shot, and orange sparks exploded through the roof. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and that was my home. Not an investment property. Not something I could replace by signing an insurance check. Claire and I had raised our daughter there. There was still a pencil mark inside the kitchen pantry showing Emily's height on her 10th birthday. Claire had painted the numbers herself. Crooked little dates beside every line because she could never hold a ruler straight. Claire had been gone 3 years. That house was where I could still hear her. Then another window blew outward. "Sir, stay back." A firefighter grabbed my shoulder as I took a step toward the driveway. "My box." "What?" "There's a blue metal box in the study." He tightened his grip. "You're not going back inside." Smoke scratched the back of my throat. Water hissed against burning siding. The air smelled of wet ash, melted plastic, pine, and something else. Something sharp. Gasoline. I knew that smell. And I knew my house didn't have a gas can anywhere near the front porch. That was when I saw her. Vanessa Harrow, president of the Silver Pines Estates Homeowners Association. She stood across the street beneath a maple tree, wrapped in a cream-colored robe, watching firefighters drag hoses across my lawn. Red and blue emergency lights washed over her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shocked. She was watching. Our eyes met. For half a second, something changed in her expression. Then came that familiar little smile. The same smile she'd worn while handing me violation notices. The same smile she'd worn when she threatened to put a lien on my property. She walked closer, stopping behind the yellow tape. "Daniel," she said softly, "this is terrible." I stared at her. She tilted her head. Then she said something I've remembered word for word ever since. "Some houses just aren't meant for neighborhoods like ours." The fire popped behind me. I didn't answer. Vanessa mistook silence for weakness. She'd been making that mistake for months. A firefighter eventually emerged carrying something blackened in both hands. My blue tin box. The paint had blistered. One corner was warped from the heat. But when I opened it, Claire's letters were still there. Smoke-stained. Warm. Alive. My hands started shaking. Not because of Vanessa. Because Claire had written one sentence on the envelope sitting at the top. "Be the man you are when nobody is watching." I closed the lid. Across the street, Vanessa was already walking home. She had no idea that Frank Mercer's doorbell camera had been recording the street that night. She didn't know investigators would find traces of accelerant beneath what remained of my porch. And she definitely didn't know what I did for a living. Vanessa knew me as the quiet widower with an old Ford pickup and work boots who told people he worked for the state. That was all I'd ever given her. She'd never asked what kind of work. 5 days later, Vanessa Harrow would walk through the polished oak doors of a courthouse believing she could intimidate one more person. She'd sit beside her attorney. She'd arrange her expensive leather folder on the table. Then the bailiff would enter. All rise. Vanessa would stand with everyone else. And when the courtroom door behind the bench opened, she'd finally understand why I had never been afraid of her. Because the man whose home she'd watched burn wasn't walking into that courtroom as another homeowner. I was walking in wearing a black judicial robe. But to understand why Vanessa burned my house, and why the fire turned out to be about something much bigger than me, you need to understand how our little $75 HOA dispute became a war. 6 months before Vanessa watched my house burn, she made one mistake that told me exactly what kind of woman she was. She looked at my boots before she looked at my face. I'd been living in Silver Pines Estates for 11 days when she appeared at the end of my driveway. It was Saturday morning, cool enough for coffee on the porch, warm enough that the smell of fresh-cut grass carried between the houses. I was replacing 2 cedar boards on the fence Claire and I had built years earlier. My old Ford F-150 sat beside me, toolbox open, circular saw humming. Sawdust clung to my jeans and work boots. Then I heard tires whisper across the pavement. A pearl-white Lexus stopped at the curb. Vanessa Harrow stepped out wearing cream slacks, spotless sneakers, and sunglasses large enough to have their own zip code. She didn't introduce herself immediately. First she inspected my truck, then my lumber, then me. Daniel Whitmore? I switched off the saw. The sudden silence felt almost theatrical. That's me. She extended one manicured hand. Vanessa Harrow, HOA president. Her perfume reached me before her handshake did. Something expensive and floral, sharp enough to compete with the cedar dust. Welcome to Silver Pines. Thank you. Her eyes moved toward the fence. Are you doing that yourself? I am. A tiny pause. Oh, one syllable. But I've spent most of my adult life listening to people say more with pauses than they ever say with words. Vanessa smiled. We usually encourage homeowners to use approved contractors. Usually? For consistency. I glanced at the 2 boards. They're the same cedar. Same dimensions. Same. Stain. Her smile tightened. You've read the architectural guidelines? Twice. That surprised her. Then came the question. So what do you do, Daniel? I could have answered completely. I could have told her about law school, 24 years in courtrooms, 11 years on the bench, and the oath I'd taken to administer justice without respect to wealth, status, or influence. Instead, I wiped sawdust from my hands. I work for the state. Her eyes dropped to my boots again. That was enough for her. I see. And just like that, she'd decided who I was. Some government employee. Probably middle management. Probably harmless. Claire would have laughed. She used to tell me that my old truck was the best character test money couldn't buy. Anyone who treats you differently before and after they know your title, she'd say, has already told you everything worth knowing. Claire had been gone 3 years by then. Cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the morning I sat beside her hospital bed listening to a heart monitor become one long, merciless tone. Afterward, everyone told me to sell the house. Too many memories. Too much maintenance. Emily especially worried about me living there alone. But I couldn't leave. Claire had chosen the maple tree by the porch. She'd painted the kitchen yellow twice because the first shade looked too much like mustard. Inside the pantry were pencil marks measuring Emily from age 6 to 17. This wasn't property to me. It was evidence that we'd had a life together. So I stayed. I fixed things. I went to work. I came home. And every morning at 5:30, I drank coffee from Claire's chipped blue mug while the neighborhood slowly woke around me. Quiet was all I wanted. Vanessa mistook quiet for weakness. 3 days after our conversation, I came home and found a white envelope taped to my garage door. HOA violation notice. My truck was apparently an aesthetic obstruction visible from the community roadway. Fine, $75. I read it twice. Then I actually laughed. The truck had been parked in the same driveway for years. Nothing in the bylaws prohibited it. I carried the notice inside, opened the HOA documents, and found exactly what I expected. No such rule. So I wrote Vanessa a short email. Polite. Specific. I cited the governing section and asked her to identify the provision authorizing the fine. Her response arrived 9 minutes later. Community standards are subject to board interpretation. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. Not a rule. Not a covenant. An interpretation. The next morning, another envelope appeared. This one concerned my fence. $150. 2 days later, the porch light became an unapproved exterior modification. $500. $75 had become $725 in less than a week. I could have ended the game quickly, but something about the paperwork bothered me. Not the amounts. The language. Every notice sounded official while carefully avoiding the one thing official authority requires. Actual authority. Then, one evening, my neighbor Frank Mercer stopped beside my mailbox. He was 67, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, with carpenter's hands permanently rough from 40 years of honest work. He looked at the violation notice in my hand. His expression changed. You fighting her? I'm asking questions. Frank glanced toward Vanessa's house before lowering his voice. Same thing around here. I waited. He swallowed. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. You're not the first person she's done this to. I looked down at the paper again. For the first time, that $75 fine didn't look ridiculous. It looked like a door. And Vanessa Harrow had just invited me to open it. The next morning, I learned Vanessa Harrow didn't like being questioned. She liked being obeyed. At 7:12, I heard 3 hard knocks against my front door. Not a neighbor's knock. A cop knock. I opened it and found Vanessa standing on the porch with a leather binder pressed against her chest. Behind her were 2 HOA board members I recognized from neighborhood emails. Witnesses. That was deliberate. Daniel, Vanessa said, wearing that polished smile. We need to discuss your outstanding violations. I glanced at my coffee. Steam curled from Claire's blue mug. It's 7 in the morning. Community. Matters don't always happen at convenient times. Neither, I thought, do consequences. But I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Vanessa opened her binder. Plastic sleeves. Color-coded tabs. Photographs of my truck, fence, porch light, even my garbage cans. She'd built a prosecution over suburbia. You currently owe $725. No, her smile flickered. Excuse me. I currently owe $0. One board member shifted his weight. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the binder. These violations have been formally issued. Issuing something doesn't make it valid. I handed her 3 printed pages. Every alleged violation. Every covenant she claimed authorized it. Every section that actually existed. I'd highlighted the contradictions in yellow. Vanessa barely looked. The board has interpretive authority. Then show me where the governing documents grant it. Silence. A sprinkler clicked on next door. Tick, tick, tick. Her jaw hardened. You're being unnecessarily difficult. No, I'm asking you to follow your own rules. That sentence changed her face. The smile disappeared. For the first time, I saw the woman underneath it. Cold, controlling, angry. You should understand something, Mr. Whitmore. Silver Pines has standards. So do I. I went inside. By Friday, my mailbox contained 2 more violations. Monday brought a certified letter. Wednesday brought another. Vanessa started photographing my property almost every morning. I'd see her Lexus crawling past at 6 miles an hour while I drank coffee on the porch. Sometimes she stopped. Sometimes she took pictures. Once, she measured the distance between my garbage bin and the garage wall. I almost admired the commitment. Almost. Then Frank Mercer showed me his paperwork. We sat at his kitchen table beneath an old brass light fixture. The room smelled like coffee and pine cleaner. Frank placed a cardboard box between us. 6 years, he said. Inside were violation notices. Hundreds of them. Grass height. Roof discoloration. Fence stain. Unauthorized flower beds. Late payment penalties stacked on administrative fees, then legal fees stacked on those. Frank's wife, Linda, had been dying from pancreatic cancer when most of them arrived. I wasn't thinking about the damn lawn, he said. His thumb rubbed the edge of a faded photograph beside the box. Linda smiling beside a Christmas tree. They knew she was sick. How much? Frank looked away. $8,400. My stomach tightened. Did you challenge it? At first. What happened? They threatened a lien. That afternoon, I started asking questions. Quietly. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, 74, had paid $3,100 after Vanessa claimed her roof violated neighborhood appearance standards. The contractor Vanessa recommended charged almost twice the estimate Eleanor had received independently. Melissa Grant, a single mother 2 streets over, had borrowed money from her sister after the HOA threatened collection proceedings over landscaping penalties. Then I noticed the same company name appearing again and again. Harrow Residential Services. I stared at it. Harrow. That wasn't proof of anything. But it was enough to keep looking. At the next monthly HOA meeting, I arrived 10 minutes early. Vanessa was already seated at the front beneath a polished Silver Pines emblem. She wore navy blue and pearls. Her binder sat beside the gavel. When she saw me, she smiled. Mr. Whitmore, how nice of you to participate. About 40 homeowners filled the folding chairs. I sat in the second row. The room smelled of burnt coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. For 20 minutes, Vanessa discussed landscaping, parking, and preserving property values. Then public comments opened. I stood. I'd like copies of the association's financial records, enforcement schedules, contractor disclosures, and board meeting minutes for the last 3 years. The room went silent. Vanessa blinked once. Those records aren't relevant to your violations. I didn't ask whether they were relevant. A nervous cough came from behind me. Vanessa leaned toward the microphone. This board will not tolerate harassment from disgruntled residents. I asked for records. You're challenging the integrity of volunteers who work very hard for this community. No, I kept my voice level. I'm asking for transparency. Her knuckles turned white around the gavel. Then she smiled again. But this time, everyone in the room could see how much effort it took. People like you always think rules don't apply to them. I looked around. Frank was staring at the floor. Melissa had folded her arms tightly across her chest. Eleanor wouldn't even look toward the board. That's when I finally understood what Vanessa had built. Not an HOA. A culture of fear. And fear works best when everyone believes they're alone. I gathered my papers. Before sitting down, I looked directly at Vanessa. Send me the records. Her eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you're getting into. Maybe she expected that to scare me. Instead, it confirmed something. My $75 parking fine had never really been about my truck. And whatever Vanessa was protecting behind those financial records was worth threatening an entire neighborhood to keep hidden. 3 days after the HOA meeting, Vanessa sent me the financial records. At least, that's what the email claimed. The attachment was 11 pages long. 3 years of HOA finances compressed into 11 pages. That alone smelled wrong. I printed everything and spread the pages across my dining room table. Claire's old brass lamp threw a warm circle over columns of numbers while rain tapped softly against the windows. Landscaping, roof maintenance, legal services, emergency repairs. Then I saw it again. Harrow Residential Services, $18,700, $24,300, $31,900. Different projects. Same company. I circled every payment in red. By midnight, the total was over $140,000. The next morning, I knocked on Frank's door. He opened it holding a cordless drill. Something break. Maybe. I handed him a copy. His eyes moved down the page, then stopped. Harrow Residential. You know them? Frank gave a dry laugh. They replaced Eleanor's roof. That afternoon, Eleanor Walsh invited us inside. Her house smelled like cinnamon tea and furniture polish. She moved slowly, one hand gripping the back of each chair as she crossed the living room. She brought out an invoice. Roof replacement, $27,600. I looked through her insurance documents. An independent contractor had quoted $14,200. Why did you use Harrow? I asked. Eleanor looked embarrassed. Vanessa said they were the only HOA-approved contractor. Frank and I exchanged a glance. Did she tell you who owns the company? Eleanor shook her head. I already knew. 20 minutes on public business records had given me the answer. Caleb Harrow, Vanessa's younger brother. That still wasn't automatically illegal. But undisclosed family contracts combined with threats, fines, and inflated invoices? Now we had a pattern. Melissa Grant gave me another piece. She showed up at my house after sunset carrying a grocery bag full of paperwork because she didn't want Vanessa seeing her with me. That told me more about Silver Pines than any balance sheet could. Melissa sat at my kitchen table. My son needed braces, she said. I had $4,000 saved. Her voice tightened. The HOA threatened a lien over landscaping fines. I paid them instead. How much? $3,600. I looked at the violation photographs. Dead grass. 2 shrubs. A mailbox with peeling paint. That was what nearly emptied a single mother's savings. Something cold settled in my chest. Courtrooms teach you that injustice rarely announces itself dramatically. Sometimes it arrives in a white envelope. Sometimes it uses polite language. Sometimes it says final notice across the top and counts on you being too frightened to ask whether the person sending it has the authority to do so. I started helping people organize their records. Nothing more. I wasn't their attorney. I wasn't using my position. I was a neighbor who knew how to read documents. Word spread. Quietly at first. People began stopping by after dark. A retired teacher. A mechanic. A young couple with a newborn. Each brought envelopes. Each had the same story. Question Vanessa, and another violation appeared. Challenge a fee, and legal costs doubled. Refuse Harrow Residential, and suddenly your property failed another inspection. Fear had become part of the neighborhood architecture. Then Vanessa found out. She cornered me beside my truck one Thursday evening. Her heels clicked against the driveway. You've been encouraging residents not to pay their obligations. No, you're holding private meetings. Coffee isn't private. Her perfume hung heavy in the humid air. You think you're helping these people? I think they're capable of making decisions once they have accurate information. Her face hardened. This community functioned perfectly well before you started interfering. I looked toward Frank's house. Then Eleanor's. Then Melissa's. No, Vanessa. People were just quieter. For once, she had no immediate answer. I stepped toward my garage. Her voice stopped me. You should be careful, Daniel. I turned. She stood beside the Lexus, arms folded. You could lose this house. The words landed differently than the others. Not like a warning, like a promise. 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived. Notice of intent to lien. Amount demanded, $9,850. I could hear Claire's voice in my head. Don't fight angry. Fight prepared. So I didn't call Vanessa. I didn't threaten her. I scanned every page, backed up every email, copied every invoice Frank, Eleanor, Melissa, and the others had trusted me with. Then I sent one written request to the HOA board. Full financial records, original invoices, contractor disclosures, bank statements, meeting minutes. 72 hours later, Vanessa replied, request denied. I stared at those 2 words. Then my phone buzzed. Emily, Dad, I'm coming over tomorrow. I'm bringing dinner. I smiled for the first time all day. Good. I could use the company. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would be the last one Emily and I ever ate in Claire's kitchen. And somewhere between Vanessa's threat and my request for those records, our dispute had stopped being about money. She had something to hide, and she had started believing my house was where I kept the evidence. The last dinner in my house smelled like rosemary chicken, burnt garlic, and the apple pie Emily had bought from a grocery store and tried to pass off as homemade. I let her lie. Some lies are acts of love. She sat across from me at Claire's kitchen table, still wearing Navy hospital scrubs after a 12-hour shift. At 24, Emily had her mother's eyes and my unfortunate habit of reading documents while eating. She noticed the stack beside my plate. HOA again. HOA again. She reached for the lien notice. I moved it away. No legal paperwork during dinner. You're literally reading it during dinner. I'm older. Different rules. She laughed. For a few minutes, the house felt like it used to. Warm. Safe. Normal. Then Emily noticed the blue tin box on the counter. You still have those? Inside were Claire's letters. Birthday notes. Anniversary cards. Little handwritten messages she'd hidden in my luggage before conferences. Emily opened one. Her smile disappeared. I miss her. So do I. We sat quietly. Rain whispered against the kitchen window. Then Emily pulled out an envelope with my name written across it in Claire's uneven handwriting. She read the front. Dad, I know. You've never opened this? I have. What does it say? I looked at the envelope. Things I needed to hear. Emily rolled her eyes. Very judicial answer. I froze. She grinned. Relax. Nobody's listening. That was the closest anyone in Silver Pines had come to hearing the truth about my job. Before leaving, Emily took one of Claire's letters. The original. She wanted to frame it. That small decision would matter more than either of us knew. At 10:43, I locked the doors. At 11:10, I backed up the HOA files again. Digital copies went to encrypted cloud storage. Another set had already been forwarded to Thomas Reed, an attorney I'd known for years. The paper copy stayed in my study. At 1:38 a.m., I woke to a sound. Crunch. Gravel. Then silence. I opened my eyes. Another sound. A soft metallic click near the front porch. I sat up. The bedroom smelled wrong. Sharp. Chemical. Then came the whoosh. Orange light exploded beneath the door. I was moving before I understood why. Fire. Smoke rolled across the ceiling. I grabbed my phone and ran toward the hallway. Heat punched me in the face. The staircase was already filling with black smoke. Something downstairs cracked. Then another whoosh. Too fast. Much too fast. I pulled my shirt over my mouth and moved toward the back stairs. The smoke alarm finally screamed. 1 second. 2. 3. By the time I reached the kitchen, flames were crawling across the front hallway. I could hear Claire's voice in my head. The box. For 1 stupid second, I turned toward the study. Then the ceiling groaned. A burning piece of trim crashed onto the floor between me and the hallway. That decided it. I kicked open the back door and stumbled onto wet grass. Cold air hit my lungs like broken glass. Behind me, my home burned. I called 911. Frank reached me before the first engine did. He came running barefoot across the street wearing sweatpants and an old flannel shirt. "Dan, I'm okay." He grabbed both my shoulders. "You sure?" I nodded. Then I smelled it again. Gasoline. Not smoke. Not melted wiring. Gasoline. Frank smelled it too. His face changed. "That's accelerant." Before I could answer, sirens swallowed the street. Fire trucks arrived. Neighbors appeared. And eventually, Vanessa did too. Cream robe. Perfect hair somehow still arranged. Watching. That's when she made her comment about some houses not belonging in neighborhoods like ours. That's when I knew. Not legally. Not yet. But I knew. Hours later, after firefighters brought out Claire's scorched blue box, I sat on the curb with a blanket around my shoulders. The metal was still warm. Inside, the letters had survived. I opened the top envelope. Claire's handwriting blurred through the water in my eyes. "Be the man you are when nobody is watching." I read it twice. Then a woman wearing a dark state fire marshal jacket approached. "Mr. Whitmore?" I closed the box. "Yes." "Rachel Kim, fire investigator." She crouched beside me. "I need to ask whether anyone might have wanted to hurt you." Across the street, Vanessa was speaking to one of her board members. I watched her. "Yes." Rachel followed my eyes. "Who?" "Start with the HOA president." Vanessa looked over. Our eyes met. She smiled. I didn't. Then Frank came running toward us holding his phone. Dan, he was breathing hard. "My doorbell camera." Rachel stood. "What about it?" Frank turned the screen toward us. The timestamp read 1:41 a.m. A vehicle rolled slowly through the grainy darkness. White SUV. It stopped near my driveway. 37 seconds later, a figure crossed toward my porch. Rachel's expression hardened. "Send me the original file." Frank nodded. I looked toward Vanessa's white Lexus. For the first time that night, she wasn't smiling. By sunrise, my house was a black skeleton. Vanessa thought the fire had destroyed whatever I knew. She was wrong twice. The records weren't in that house. And neither was the one letter from Claire that Emily had taken home. 5 days later, Vanessa would learn something else she'd failed to burn. My identity. 5 days after the fire, Vanessa Harrow walked into my courthouse wearing a charcoal suit, pearl earrings, and the confidence of a woman who still believed she was the most powerful person in every room. I saw her before she saw me. From the narrow window behind the courtroom, I watched her place a leather folder on counsel's table. Her attorney whispered something. Vanessa laughed. That laugh mattered. My home was still surrounded by yellow tape. My clothes still smelled faintly of smoke, no matter how many times they were washed. And Vanessa was laughing. But the proceeding that morning wasn't about my fire. It involved a separate civil enforcement matter connected to an HOA filing that had entered my docket weeks earlier, before I knew Vanessa was connected to it. The moment I recognized her name after the fire, I had already notified the court administrator and prepared the necessary disclosure. That distinction mattered, because revenge and justice can look dangerously similar when you're angry. Claire taught me never to confuse them. At 9 o'clock sharp, the bailiff stepped through the side door. The room settled. Paper stopped rustling. Chairs scraped against polished wood. "All rise." Vanessa stood. The door behind the bench opened. I walked in wearing my black robe. For 24 years, courtrooms had taught me to notice small things. Hands, eyes, breathing. Vanessa's reaction lasted maybe 2 seconds. But I saw all of it. Her mouth opened. Her fingers froze around a silver pen. The color drained from her face. The pen slipped. Click. It struck the table. I took my seat. Vanessa stared at me as if the dead had walked through the wall. I looked across the courtroom. "Good morning. Please be seated." Everyone sat. Vanessa didn't. Not immediately. Her attorney touched her elbow. She dropped into the chair. I could almost see the last 6 months replaying behind her eyes. My old Ford. My work boots. The cedar fence. I work for the state. Every violation. Every threat. You could lose this house. Then the fire. And now me. Above her. In a robe. "Your Honor," her attorney began cautiously. Vanessa turned toward him. "Your Honor." She hadn't meant to say it loudly. But the room was quiet. I heard it. So did everyone else. I didn't smile. That was important. A lesser version of me might have enjoyed the moment. The man who had watched his home collapse into burning timber certainly wanted to. Judge Whitmore couldn't. I placed my hands on the bench. Before any substantive matter is addressed, the court needs to make a disclosure. Vanessa went perfectly still. I explained the connection. I identified myself as a Silver Pines homeowner. I stated that there was an active fire investigation involving my residence, and that circumstances had created an obvious conflict requiring reassignment. No accusation. No dramatic speech. No threat. Just procedure. Vanessa's attorney looked relieved. Vanessa looked confused. Maybe she'd expected me to punish her. Maybe that's what she would have done with power. I am recusing myself from this matter, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. The hearing would be reassigned to another judge. My role ended there. The gavel touched wood. One clean crack. Vanessa had finally learned who I was. And then I did the one thing she couldn't understand. I gave up the power to decide her case. Outside the courtroom, she caught me near the secured hallway before a deputy stepped between us. Daniel. I stopped. Her voice was smaller now. You never told me. You never asked. You let me think. I let you think whatever you chose to think. Her jaw tightened. This changes nothing. I looked at her. No, it changes nothing. That unsettled her more than anger would have. Because she finally understood. My title wasn't going to save me. And it wasn't going to destroy her. Evidence would decide what happened next. Rachel Kim called me that afternoon. I answered from Emily's guest room, where I'd been living since the fire. We got the lab results, she said. I sat down. And accelerant confirmed. Multiple origin points. Arson. The words settled heavily between us. Then Rachel continued. We enhanced Mercer's footage. I could hear papers moving. The SUV isn't our best evidence. What is? The person who crossed your lawn was carrying something. What? A red fuel container. My grip tightened around the phone. Rachel paused. Daniel, there's more. What kind of more? We interviewed 2 board members this morning. One of them says Vanessa was furious about your financial records request. I looked through the window at Emily's backyard. Wind moved through the trees. She said you had copies in your house. My skin went cold. Then I understood. The timing. The study. The financial records. The fire hadn't started because Vanessa hated my fence. It hadn't even started because she hated me. She believed evidence was inside my home. Rachel. Yes. The records she wanted destroyed aren't gone. Silence. Where are they? Backed up. Multiple locations. Rachel exhaled slowly. Good. I stared at Claire's rescued blue box sitting on the dresser. Vanessa had burned my home believing fire could erase paper. Instead, she'd transformed an HOA dispute into an arson investigation. And for the first time, I realized something even darker. If she was willing to burn down a house to hide those financial records, then whatever was buried inside them was bigger than any of us had imagined. The first real crack in Vanessa Harrow's empire came from a man who had spent 6 years being afraid to speak. Frank Mercer called me at 6:08 the next morning. Dan, she's here. I sat up. Who? Vanessa. That woke me completely. Where? Your house. 20 minutes later, I pulled onto Silver Pines Drive. The ruins looked worse in daylight. Black rafters reached into the gray morning like broken ribs. Wet insulation hung from what remained of the walls. Every step near the property released that sour mixture of ash, soaked wood, and burned plastic. Vanessa's Lexus was parked across the street. Rachel Kim's state vehicle sat behind it. Vanessa stood near the yellow tape arguing with Rachel. This is HOA property jurisdiction, she snapped. I have a responsibility to inspect hazardous conditions. Rachel didn't move. This is an active arson scene. I am the association president, and I'm the state fire marshal investigator. That ended the conversation. Vanessa saw me. Her expression changed instantly. Daniel. I stopped beside Rachel. What is she doing here? Trying to enter the scene. Vanessa folded her arms. I was checking whether any HOA records survived. There it was. Not furniture. Not photographs. Not whether I'd nearly died. Records. Rachel heard it too. What records? She asked. Vanessa hesitated. Community correspondence. I looked at her. You mean the financial documents? Her eyes flicked toward me. Just once. But Rachel caught it. Investigators live on moments like that. Vanessa recovered quickly. I have no idea what you're referring to. Good, I said. Then you won't mind knowing they're all backed up. Silence. A truck rumbled somewhere beyond the subdivision. Vanessa's face stayed composed, but her right hand tightened around her purse strap. I continued. Cloud storage. Off-site copies. multiple locations. That was the moment she understood the fire had accomplished nothing. She walked back to her Lexus without another word. Rachel waited until the SUV disappeared. Remind me never to play poker with you. I wasn't bluffing. I know. That afternoon, Thomas Reed brought the backup files to Rachel. Once investigators started comparing the records Vanessa had provided with original invoices from homeowners, the numbers stopped looking sloppy. They started looking engineered. Harrow Residential Services had received more than $310,000 from Silver Pines over 4 years. Several projects had no competitive bids. Some invoices described repairs homeowners said never happened. One payment listed emergency drainage work on a street that didn't even have storm drains. Then Rachel found the connection that changed the investigation. 3 days before my fire, Vanessa had emailed another board member. The message was short. We need to know exactly what Whitmore has and where he's keeping it. Frank provided the next piece. He'd been standing outside my garage the afternoon before the fire when Vanessa drove past. Frank had joked loudly. Dan's got enough paperwork in there to bury the whole board. He meant it figuratively. Vanessa apparently didn't. She heard me, Frank said. We were sitting at his kitchen table again. His hands trembled around his coffee mug. This happened because of me. No, if I hadn't said that, Frank. He looked up. The person who lights the match owns the fire. He stared at me for several seconds, then nodded. That evening, Frank did something more important than handing over camera footage. He started calling neighbors. Melissa came first, then Eleanor, then 6 others. By the weekend, 14 homeowners had agreed to give statements. Fear works by isolation. Vanessa had spent years convincing everyone that challenging her meant standing alone. The fire changed that. People started comparing notices, invoices, dates, threats. Once those pieces touched, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Melissa discovered her landscaping fine had been approved at a board meeting she had attended. No fine had been discussed. Eleanor found a contractor authorization carrying her signature. She had never signed it. Frank found late fees charged 3 weeks before his payment was actually due. The fraud wasn't hidden behind some sophisticated criminal operation. It was hidden behind exhaustion. People had been too tired, embarrassed, or frightened to compare notes. Then Rachel called me Sunday night. We executed a search warrant on Harrow Residential. I stood beside Emily's kitchen window. What did you find? 2 sets of books. I closed my eyes. And payments routed through 3 companies. Your HOA isn't the only association involved. That surprised me. How many? We don't know yet. Then her voice changed. Dan, there's something else. I waited. The red fuel container from the video? Yes. We found one in Caleb Harrow's warehouse. My pulse slowed. Not accelerated. Slowed. Can you connect it? Not yet. But we're getting closer. After the call, I looked at Claire's burned blue box sitting on Emily's counter. Vanessa had believed destroying my home would make people quieter. Instead, Frank had spoken. Melissa had spoken. Eleanor had spoken. 14 neighbors had spoken. And investigators were now following money far beyond Silver Pines. That's when I understood the mistake Vanessa had really made. She hadn't burned down the place where the evidence was hidden. She'd burned down the thing keeping everyone afraid. And once fear was gone, people had a remarkable amount to say. 8 months later, Vanessa Harrow walked into a courtroom again. This time, I wasn't wearing the robe. I was sitting in the second row. That mattered. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, old paper, and coffee drifting through the hallway every time the doors opened. Frank sat on my right. Melissa sat beside him. Eleanor was 3 seats down, wearing the blue coat she'd told me she saved for funerals and important occasions. Apparently, this qualified as both. Vanessa entered with her attorneys. No pearls, no HOA binder, no polished smile. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Power does that when people stop believing in it. Her case had been assigned to Judge Rebecca Collins from another district. I had no role in the prosecution, no influence over the evidence, and no authority over what happened next. That was exactly how it needed to be. Rachel testified first. She walked the jury through the fire scene. Multiple points of origin. Accelerant beneath the porch. Laboratory results. Then came Frank's camera footage. The courtroom lights dimmed. 1:41 a.m. A white SUV appeared on the screen. It slowed. Stopped. A figure crossed toward my property carrying a red container. Nobody spoke. You could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. The prosecution showed traffic camera footage from 2 intersections. Same vehicle, same route. Then they displayed records connecting the Lexus to Vanessa. Her attorney shifted in his chair. Vanessa didn't move. Rachel explained the fuel container recovered from Caleb Harrow's warehouse. Trace residue matched the accelerant profile recovered from my porch. That alone wasn't the whole case. It didn't need to be, because Vanessa had left something more permanent than fingerprints. She'd left a pattern. Emails appeared on the courtroom monitor. We need to know exactly what Whitmore has and where he's keeping it. Another, those records cannot leave the neighborhood. Then financial investigators took over. Harrow Residential Services. Inflated invoices. Undisclosed family contracts. Fabricated repairs. Payments routed through shell companies. The total wasn't $140,000. It wasn't $310,000. By the time investigators followed transactions across several associations, they identified more than $1.2 million in suspicious payments. But the testimony that stayed with me wasn't about money. It was Eleanor. She walked slowly to the witness stand. Her hand trembled when she raised it for the oath. Vanessa watched her. Eleanor looked back. For years, that woman had been frightened of receiving another white envelope. Now she spoke clearly. She told me I'd lose my house. The prosecutor asked, "Why did you believe her?" Eleanor swallowed. Because everyone believed her. That sentence landed harder than any accusation. Then Melissa testified. She described draining the savings she'd set aside for her son's braces. Frank described Linda's cancer. His voice broke once. Only once. "I was taking my wife to chemotherapy," he said, "and they were photographing my grass." Vanessa lowered her eyes. When my turn came, I walked to the witness stand as Daniel Whitmore. Not Judge Whitmore. Daniel. Homeowner. Widower. Victim. I described the threats. The records request. The gasoline smell. The fire. Then the prosecutor placed Claire's blue tin box on the evidence table. Blackened metal. Blistered paint. The courtroom disappeared for a second. I could see Claire at our kitchen counter again. Laughing. Alive. "Mr. Whitmore," the prosecutor asked, "did you ever use your judicial position to retaliate against Ms. Harrow?" "No, why not?" I looked toward Vanessa. "Because authority isn't permission to become the person you're fighting." Nobody moved. I continued. "If I used power to punish someone because she hurt me, I'd be proving her philosophy right." Vanessa stared at me. For the first time, there was no contempt in her face. Only understanding. The verdict came after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty on the arson-related charges presented. Guilty on fraud counts. Guilty on evidence tampering and conspiracy counts. Vanessa closed her eyes. The deputy approached. Handcuffs clicked. A small metallic sound. Nothing cinematic about it. No cheering. No applause. Just consequences. As Vanessa was led away, Frank touched my shoulder. His eyes were wet. "You know what the strange part is?" "What?" He looked around at Melissa, Eleanor, and the other Silver Pines homeowners filling the benches. "For the first time in 6 years, I'm not scared to go home." That was when I realized the verdict wasn't the victory. This was. Vanessa had spent years teaching people that power meant making others afraid. But fear had finally changed sides. Not because we'd threatened her. Because we'd stopped being afraid of each other knowing the truth. Outside, afternoon sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. Eleanor hugged Melissa. Frank stood beside me. And nobody asked what happened to Vanessa next. For the first time, we were talking about what would happen to Silver Pines. Because justice had removed the person who hurt us. Now we had to decide what kind of community we'd build in her place. 1 year after Vanessa Harrow was let out of that courtroom, I stood in the same place where I'd once watched my roof collapse into flames. Only now, I could smell fresh cedar. A hammer struck somewhere behind me. Tap, tap, tap. The new house was almost finished. I could have built something bigger. The insurance settlement would have covered it. And the civil recovery from the HOA scandal gave me options Claire and I never had when we first bought the place. I didn't want bigger. I wanted home. So the kitchen went back exactly where it had been. Same window over the sink. Same yellow walls. Emily even found the original paint color buried in an old photograph. "Still looks like mustard," she said. "Your mother liked mustard." She absolutely did not. We laughed. That sound filled the unfinished kitchen better than furniture ever could. Some things couldn't be rebuilt. The pencil marks from Emily's childhood were gone. Claire's favorite chair was gone. The dining table where we'd eaten thousands of ordinary dinners had become ash. For months, I thought rebuilding meant replacing those things. I was wrong. A home isn't a museum. It's where people keep choosing to love each other after something has been lost. Silver Pines changed too. The old board dissolved. Financial records became accessible to every homeowner. Major contracts required multiple bids and conflict disclosures. More importantly, people started showing up. Not because they were afraid, because they finally believed their voices mattered. Frank became treasurer. I laughed for almost a full minute when he told me. I hate paperwork, he complained. That's why I trust you with it. Melissa joined the oversight committee. Eleanor refused every official position anyone offered her. Instead, she sat in the front row at every meeting and asked uncomfortable questions. She was remarkably good at it. Part of the recovered money established a legal assistance fund for homeowners who couldn't afford help when disputes arose. No one would ever again have to empty a child's medical savings because a board president mailed them a frightening piece of paper. That mattered to me more than Vanessa's sentence ever could. One Saturday afternoon, Emily came over carrying a small frame. I've been saving this. Inside was the letter she'd taken home the night before the fire. Claire's handwriting. The original. Emily placed it on the new mantel. Beside it sat the blue tin box. Still blackened. Still warped. I could have cleaned it. I never did. Some scars deserve to remain visible. Frank walked through the open front door, carrying a toolbox. Mailbox is crooked. It's supposed to be. No mailbox is supposed to be crooked. Claire liked it that way. Frank stared at me. You're using your dead wife to defend bad carpentry. Successfully. He shook his head and walked outside. Through the window, I watched him help a young couple across the street install their own mailbox. Their little boy rode circles around them on a red bicycle. A year earlier, Frank had been afraid to speak. Above a whisper about the HOA. Now he was arguing cheerfully about post-depth with people he'd met 10 minutes earlier. That was justice too. Not the kind that fits neatly into a court order. The kind that gives ordinary life back to people. That evening, after everyone left, I sat alone on the porch. Claire's chipped blue coffee mug rested beside me. The neighborhood was quiet. Not frightened quiet. Peaceful quiet. There's a difference. I thought about Vanessa. For a long time, I believed the worst thing she'd done was burn my house. It wasn't. The worst thing she'd done was convince decent people that they were powerless. She'd convinced Frank that grief made him weak. Melissa that being short on money meant she couldn't fight back. Eleanor that age meant nobody would listen. And she'd looked at my truck, my boots, and the sawdust on my jeans, and decided a man's worth could be measured by what she thought his title was. Then she walked into my courtroom. All rise. People sometimes imagine that was my favorite moment. It wasn't. My favorite moment came months later when Frank said he wasn't afraid to go home. That's the part one remember. Because power isn't a robe. It isn't a gavel. It isn't a title on an office door. Real power is knowing you could hurt someone and choosing restraint. It's standing beside frightened people until they remember how to stand for themselves. It's refusing to let someone else's cruelty decide what kind of person you become. I reached for Claire's letter one last time. At the bottom was the sentence that survived everything. Be the man you are when nobody is watching. I smiled. The sun disappeared behind the rebuilt roof. Across Silver Pines, porch lights flickered on one by one. Vanessa burned my house because she thought fear was power. She was wrong. She gave us smoke. We found each other through it. She tried to destroy evidence. She created witnesses. She tried to make me angry enough to abuse my authority. Instead, she reminded me why authority has limits. And that's the thing people like Vanessa never understand until it's too late. Justice doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need revenge. It doesn't even need you to hate the person who hurt you. It needs evidence. Courage. People willing to stand together. And patience. Justice isn't loud. It's smart. It's patient. And sooner or later, it's inevitable.